What's up, guys? Paul Salmon here. So on this version of Students That Have Tried to Kill Me, I get to take partial, if not most, credit for this episode, and that's coming up in just a minute. Okay guys, so the purpose of doing these videos is that I strongly believe that we can learn from each other's mistakes. And I freely admit that I'm not perfect and I make mistakes, and I've gotten away with a lot of them that may have gotten me hurt or killed in the past. But I think it's worth talking about them and what things led to those mistakes and how you try not to make those mistakes again. So learn from my mistakes and the mistakes of others, and maybe you get to live a whole lot longer. In fact, one of the best things you can ever do is to spend some time perusing NTSB reports. Now, that sounds like a very morbid thing to do, but you can do some searches for NTSB reports involving helicopters and do a search for those. And when you start reading those reports, they can be a big help on kind of making you aware of things that can lead to mistakes. So again, sounds like a morbid thing to do, but it can be quite helpful. So let's continue on and talk about what happened with this episode. Okay, so what happened was I had a gentleman that had actually flown helicopter with me a couple of times, didn't have more than an hour or so of instruction under his belt in the past, but he had given me a ride one time back from, I think it was New Orleans or Lafayette, Louisiana, or someplace back home. And so I owed him a favor. He called me up. He needed to be picked up at an airport where he had a plane, was dropping off a plane an hour or so away, and needed to be picked up. And so I obliged and went over, picked him up, and brought him back on the helicopter. So on the way back, I let him fly. We get him in the air, and I go over everything with him real quick. Get him up in the air. We're flying home, and I was totally distracted. I don't remember exactly what I was doing. I think I was sending a text to somebody on the ground here that I had another student showing up. For whatever reason, I got distracted. I don't remember exactly what I was doing, but it really doesn't matter what the hell I was doing. I should have been paying attention to him and not distracted by what I was doing on my phone or sending a text or whatever. So what happened was, this is an aircraft that was going in for rebuild soon. It only had about 100 hours left to go on it. In fact, the gentleman had the aircraft and was getting ready to rebuild it and wanted to know if I wanted to fly all the rest of the hours off of it, so we were doing that. Well, as you well know, aircraft, if they get a few hours on them and they get close to 2,200 hours where it's time to rebuild them, engines get a little bit tired, don't quite make as much power as they used to, and that can be an issue. So in this instance, what happened was I was not paying attention to the student, and he was pulling way too much manifold pressure. And if you have a Robinson helicopter, and this was in the summer, and if you pull up to excessive manifold pressure, what happens is the engine will begin to overheat. You'll notice that the 0540s run a little bit hot anyway, just because the engines are all cowled up and that sort of thing, compared to the 360 and a 22, that sort of thing. But anyway, the aircraft is pulling too much manifold pressure, and I didn't catch it. What happens with that is that the engine will become overheated, and because of excessive blow-by, you'll start to have a power loss. When the Robinson, the governor, if you have a power loss, the governor will continue to roll the throttle up to maintain rotor RPM until it just can't do it anymore, until the throttle's rolled wide open. And this was in the pre-full throttle light days where you didn't get a indication of that by a light illuminating now, like you have full throttle lights on all the R44s and 22s. So anyway, what happens is eventually the engine starts losing so much power that it can't maintain rotor RPM, and the next thing you know, slowly but surely, the rotor horn will go on, the low rotor RPM horn will go off, and that'll be your first indication that you've got a problem. So that happened, and we were at about 1,500 feet. If that ever happens to you, you got to cool the engine down, right? The aircraft, so anyway, lowered the collective, and we slowed the thing down to 55, which is basically the minimum descent speed. Goes by about 10 different names, but 55 is the airspeed that takes the least amount of power to maintain altitude in an R44. So I slowed the aircraft down to 55, checked down to about 17 inches of manifold pressure, and despite that, trying to cool the thing down, still would not maintain altitude. If you try to pull it at 17, 18, we'd start to get a low rotor RPM horn again, so I'd have to check down. So it was clear that we were going to go to the ground. So luck would have it, I was over a highway. I thought, well, I'll just auto it into the highway here below me. There was no cars on it. And at the last, when I got down to just a couple hundred feet, there was a nice clearing in between the trees, and I could see that a field to the right of me was flat. So I elected to go into that field instead of the highway, just in case a car did come along. And so successfully put the thing down. Actually landed under power and got the thing into the field. Well, the problem with that is now I'm sitting in a field with grass that's about 18 to 24 inches tall. And now I'm wondering if I'm going to set the field on fire that I'm sitting in. And what you have to do if you ever overheat one like this is you lower the collective down all the way down to the stop, roll the throttle up to about 70%, and that'll cool the engine pretty quickly. So it took us several minutes to get the engine down to normal operating temperatures, where the aircraft would actually, you could pull the collective and lift off. So, you know, this one was not the student's fault. Yes, they were pulling too much manifold pressure, but I should have had my head out of my ass and not paying attention to it like I was as the cause for the event. So if you guys are flight instructors, just remember, you know, and this guy that I was flying with, I'd flown with him before, high-time airplane pilot, been around aviation for years and years and years, and that's the kind of situation that's going to get you. You're going to make assumptions about him, even though he'd flown with me before, that he knows better than to pull excessive manifold pressure, but obviously that didn't happen, and I didn't keep an eye on it. So, given the same scenario, if you guys get into, just be careful. Don't get complacent. Don't get distracted. Keep an eye on the student all the time you're in flying, and don't make the same stupid ass mistake that I did by allowing the student to pull so much manifold pressure that he overheated the engine, and we ended up basically in a forced landing situation because of it. So, okay, well, I hope that's helpful. Again, you guys pay attention to your students when you're doing flight instruction with them. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next video. A whole lot of wind down in here, so don't mind, still